So in this part, I'd like to talk about the concept of rain garden, because the concept of rain garden really puts together some of the different strategies for retention of water on site. And in these slides, we can see, especially in the upper right, water coming off of the rooftop of the garden, water coming off of paving surfaces is put into a bioswale. The bioswale runs throughout the landscape, so water is sheeting across the landscape, flowing into the bioswale. The bioswale is constructed of very porous material, which promotes high infiltration. Consequently, we're reducing runoff volume and we're reducing the rate of runoff very significantly. Landscapes such as this can have runoff coefficients very, very low, where most of the water is going to be infiltrating and then evapotranspiring back into the atmosphere. We see another example in the lower left-hand diagram of water coming off of the rooftop, the adjacent rooftop, flowing through the downspout and coming either across the surface or through subsurface means into this bioswale. And the bioswale then is capturing the rooftop water, and it's also capturing water coming off of the adjacent walkway and the adjacent parking area. You can see that the bioswale here is combined with a gravel treatment around the paving surface as a way of enhancing infiltration. So again, it's capturing water where it falls, where it lands, when it lands, and trying to get it into the ground as quickly as possible. Another example of bioswales, again, the idea is to get the water into the ground as quickly as possible and to use plants as a means of filtering contaminants out of the runoff. Here we see a rain garden set in a commercial setting. Here we see it in a residential setting. And in a residential setting especially, it's possible to reduce runoff to almost zero by making strategic use of retention systems that promote both storage of the water and remediation of water quality. Another example of rain gardens in a residential setting, and these don't have to be gigantic, enormous systems. The idea is to take water coming off of the rooftop, off of the driveway, and off of the yard of this house, and just this house. In this case, it's also pulling water off of the street landscape. But the rain garden that you see in the upper right is just dealing with the water that's generated immediately on site. And in that sense, then, we can really begin to talk about handling all of the runoff that's generated by precipitation falling on this property, on the property itself. So we're generating almost a zero runoff landscape. Other examples of rain gardens in a residential setting, and these can be combined to include a wide assortment of materials. You can see that there are shrub and herbaceous materials, but also trees and other woody plants integrated into the planting design of the rain garden. Here we see a rain garden that is a neighborhood rain garden. This is a plan view, as if you were flying in a helicopter looking down on the landscape. These are individual houses. This is two major streets intersecting here. And in behind the houses, then, there is a regional system of rain gardens that have been connected, so that all of the runoff coming off of the houses and all of the runoff coming off of the hard surfaces associated with the residential site, including the yards, flows into this bioswale, which is planted quite heavily. And the bioswale then is designed to retain all of the runoff that is generated on site and to infiltrate that runoff. So these residential neighborhoods that typically might have had a runoff coefficient in the neighborhood of 0.45 to 0.65 are going to be down around 0.1 to 0.25 in terms of their runoff coefficients. That is a reduction from 65% of the precipitation joining runoff to 10% or 15%. So these so-called regional systems or neighborhood systems chain together the efforts of one property owner to the efforts of another property owner, yet retain the individual privacy of the property owner and her desire or his desire to have various kinds of yard activities in the backyard.